And we should be starting up pretty soon. There's always a little bit of a delay between myself, or the OBS and YouTube. But it looks like it's here.
So would you like me to pull up YouTube? Or is that something that I won't need?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, you can. So, hello,
okay, because it'll just create like this echo delay thing if I don't need it.
So, let me
something I need, sure.
Okay, good. Looks like we are live, and hopefully people can hear us. And
hey.
So I am here with Ricky, and we are going to be talking about the OTO. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Ricky?
Hey, everybody. If you hadn't picked up on me before, I'm in the sort of skeptosphere, whatever you want to call it. I do think a little bit different. I don't cover the typical SJW, feminism, that kind of stuff. I usually talk more about foreign policy, national security, tech stuff. I'm big into that. Outside of that, so like what we're going to be talking about, which is kind of out of my usual purview for what I talk about on Twitter or other streams, we're talk a little bit about the occult, since I have some experience with that. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. All right. So we got a bunch of people in the chat here. Let me know, chat, how the sound is if you guys have a problem hearing either one of us or both of us, especially if I switch cameras too. So we have sort of a little bit of an outline that we're going to probably loosely follow. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is, what is the OTO? Because I know a lot of people hear these things, but maybe they don't know exactly what the OTO is and what it stands for. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay. So OTO is Ordo Templi Orientis. It's the Order of the Temple of the East. There really is pretty much one main OTO. For a while there was a couple of offshoots, people disagreeing on lineage inheritance, but that seems to be largely resolved now, actually through legal action. But so the OTO is a global organization. They're most active in the United States, and they are, I believe, still headquartered in California, I think. So it's a fraternal order similar to Masonry. However, it has Aleister Crowley's system of thelema rather than the more traditional Masonic rite stuff. So there's still grades like in Masonry, so 1, 2, 3, etc. And you progress through the grades. The purpose of the OTO is to help you, guide you through those grades. And so the OTO is much more of a group-oriented, group for Thelemites. There's different bodies throughout the world, especially in the United States, and there's different levels of bodies. So, if it's a smaller group in a more like a less densely populated area, you might not have, let's say, I'm trying to remember the order of them, but it's like
a full lodge.
Yeah, so the full lodge, that's the highest. That's you have your own building, and there's a lot of people, and you do regular events, and so that's where I started out at. I was fortunate enough to live by one at the time. And then there's it's a Oasis is sort of the starting out one, and then it goes from there. So there's 3 or 4 different kinds. It's all based upon active members, how well you can function as a body. Let's see. So we'll talk about AA a little bit later, but I would say right now it's important to keep in mind that OTO is definitely a group-based system. there is it's technically not a part of OTO. It's a separate group, but they work very closely together. They're called the EGC, which is Ecclesia Catholica, which is the Gnostic Catholic Church. And it's not so much in like a Christian sense as like it sounds. There is a lot of Christian iconography within Thelema and the orders, but it's not limited to that. So Thelema grabs from all over the place, whatever seems useful. So if you can like kind of look at it more as a symbolic, like useful metaphorical thing rather than like a Christian thing, it helps you a lot that way. But so like once you progress so far into the OTO, it becomes inevitable that you will have to participate in the EGC. Like in higher grades, they're intercoupled, but early on you don't have to. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the basic setup as far as the organization goes. I'm not really sure there's anything too much major to say about it outside of that. We can go into the details later.
Okay. I know we're not going to be talking about the history of OTO because you felt it would probably be better for people, or people could just go online and look it up and find out the history of the OTO, correct?
Yeah, I figure so. OTO has a website. They're not secret in the sense that we don't exist secret. They just are protective of their certain rituals and what you gain knowledge-wise to the different grades. And with that, it's not so much that it's like forbidden. It's more like if you want to do this right, like in a psychological way or hierarchical way, you should go in the order and not know what's ahead of you. So you can go to the OTO's main website, and it'll have either through there or the U.S. Grand Lodge website, which you can find through that website, and it'll tell you the complete history, or even Thelemapedia, so it's like the Wikipedia for Thelema. You can find the history on there. So I was more interested in talking with Hellbound about sort of more like personal experiences rather than stuff you can find on your own. I thought that would be more interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So let me see. We have a bunch of people that are kind of chatting between themselves. So we'll be taking questions.
Talking about cakes so late.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that, or do you want to?
We can always take one from the chat. That's cool with me. I don't want to. Hopefully, we'll have some kind of structure, like flow wise, but I don't mind going that way. Someone's talking about Duquette. I actually have met Duquette a few times. I've actually housed him a few times.
Okay.
Whoever Jeremy is. This Ben person keeps talking about cakes of light.
Yeah, and my understanding of the cakes of light is quite different than other people's understandings of it, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that. If you have knowledge of it, or if you feel like sharing it.
Okay, so some people look at it as symbolic, other people take it literally. And there's some kind of freedom in that depending on your body or your lodge or whatever. It doesn't literally say blood and semen like it's being talked about in the chat.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of implied that sorry, Jeremy. No comment, but you can get what I think of that. It's kind of implied the sort of blood part, but it's never like you can't grasp from the phrasing in the Book of the Law whether or not it's to be literal. And in general, the Book of the Law is intentionally kind of more archetypical and vague to a point, so you can interpret it in your own way and still have it mean something to you without it being so loose that it means nothing. Mm-hmm. But with cakes of light, they're basically so like someone's talking about Eucharist. It's basically like that. So in the main ritual of the OTO through the EGC, there are cakes of light, and they're just, you can make them however you want. There's different bodies use different formulas and different shapes. But the point of it is similar to like communion in a Christian sense. But it's just been altered to be more thelemic, and you'll see that throughout like a lot of the themes of the practices of Thelemites and the actual Book of the Laws, they'll be kind of like, Crowley generally seemed to have grabbed what he thought was sort of like the best or most effective things from different world religions and kind of fit them together and modified them slightly to be what he liked as far as like in line with what he thought was a good practice. And then that's what's kind of the general concept of Thelema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, yeah. Okay, so let's see. So what about the layman of the Oro Temple Orientis? Can you talk a little bit about that? And when I'm saying, you know what I mean when I say layman?
Yeah, you're talking about the pointed oval, or however you want to describe it. With the
yeah,
dove.
it's kind of like their symbol.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me see if I can remember this because there's a lot of symbolism in it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, Crowley
like
was
there
definitely
with everything else. Yeah, there's nothing simple about this dude. So the main takeaway for me is the dove that's flying like downward over the chalice is supposed to be dropping. So there's like a drop of blood going into it, and that's symbolic, mostly in the sense of it's similar. Like again, it's similar to the sort of Christian concept of like how the wine works, because you do drink wine in certain rituals, and that's supposed to be the blood. It's not literal blood. That's someone was talking about misconceptions in the chat, and that's one of them. That's kind of common too. But yeah, so it's kind of like transcendence. So they're at the top, and I'm doing this off the top of my head. I don't have it up in front of me. But at the top is, you have like, I think it's gold and blue, like light beams. Is it if you see the colored version? And so, that's sort of like the heaven. So the dove is coming down from that, and it's dropping the lifeblood into the chalice. And that's sort of the general symbolism of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So someone's talking about this Jeremy person and this Rita person. They're talking about the sort of sexual aspect of it.
Right.
The joke, by the way, is in a lot of bodies is it's a solar phallic sex cult.
Solar phallic. Yeah, I like that. So I know that when we were talking a little bit earlier before we started, how you were talking about how you wanted to talk about OTO, how you interpret it, how you reference it, and how you look at it. So
yeah,
and I completely agree with you on that. I think that's one of the great things about a lot of the, I don't know what a good description of to call them, pagan religions, fringe philosophies, whatever it is, but of all the various groups of like Wicca, OTO, AA, Thelema, Thelema and OTO are pretty much the same, but all the various philosophies, I think that they are very personal. I think that that's one of the things that most people are very, annoyed by is this kind of like this dogmatic principle where you have to believe this and you have to believe just like everybody else. I think that those of us who study a lot of these things, we naturally abhor that because it's very disturbing to have like this dogma philosophy. But if you could you talk a little bit about sort of the philosophy of the OTO and maybe how you interpret the philosophy of OTO through your own lens?
Sure. So I guess I should start by saying what I was kind of discussing with you before we started. So the way I look at Thelema in general, and so that includes specific orgs like OTO, I'm interested in it from like an anthropological sense. So it's more of like a studying of behavior to me, like human behavior, more than like, I don't take like a religious type approach to it. So if you are familiar with how Sam Harris looks at meditation, it's kind of like that. That's how I look at it. It's more of like a sort of skeptical approach, and it's like, okay, I can see benefits of these certain things. How can I use those for me and to have this sort of like psychological benefit of me? So I'm basically like intentionally suspending my critical thinking for a little while to just gain that psychological or emotional benefit from whatever I'm doing. But OTO wise, they're just a formal way of organizing thelemites. I mean, they do help each other in the sense that the higher grade people provide the guidance for the lower grades. But outside of that, as far as I am concerned, the only real purpose of it is a lot of the rituals in the OTO you can't do alone. That you just need other people. So that's kind of a big reason for that existence. The rest of it's sort of like the camaraderie fraternity type of thing that you would see out of like Masonry.
Okay. So I'm hearing that there's an echo coming from my end, so I will try to fix that. In the meantime, I'll try to kind of maybe see if we can just focus more on you. So I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but what are some of the connections to the OTO and Thelema? Are those two separate things? Are they pretty much the same? Or is there any real, I mean, what would be the differences and the similarities between those two things?
So they definitely can be decoupled. So like in the same way that there's, well, not quite the same way, but so there's solitary witches, right? Or even solitary Wiccans, and if you're like an eclectic, like if you're not what Americans would call a British traditional lineage or something like that. But the difference is Thelema has the Book of the Law, so like there is a central text. There are several books actually that if you were to say do it on your own, it'd be really hard in some parts to like. It would take a lot of effort to like understand all of it on your own, but you can. There are plenty of people that do. So the OTO is Thelemic, but Thelema is not OTO. If that makes sense. So it's unidirectional. So you can. So like for me, for example, and I'm kind of unusual in how I approach it in the sense of, like a studying type of thing. But in my experience, most people that I've met that are Thelemites, they are like in an atheistic sense. They look at it that way. There are theistic Thelemites, but they seem to be few and far between. And the impression I get is if you are one of these sort of theistic Thelemites, you look at the OTO as more like necessary because of the religious aspect that includes that EGC church that I was talking about earlier. But they do come apart. So while I have been involved with the OTO in the past, just to kind of check it out and see what it was about, I'm not any kind of active group participant, you could say. So that's an example of that. The AA is different. I don't want to go off topic too much. We'll talk about the AA a little bit later, but I just want to say that AA is more solitary, and that's kind of how I look at it. So you can do it yourself, or there are lineages if you prefer to have an instructor, but you don't have to. So it's a little bit different. It's kind of unique in that sense, especially in the occult/pagan world, whatever you want to call it, because of that central text. That kind of allows you, and the other writings of Crowley, that allows you to have your sort of individual practice without it being like all over the place, and like you and other Thelemites won't have much in common, for example. So there is like a uniting thing in that sense.
So I switched mics, so let me know if that feedback is gone. If not, I'll see what I can do to correct it. And also let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me still, Ricky?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, all right, good. So hopefully the chat can still hear me. There's a little bit of a delay, so I have a question for you, but I'm wondering if you can answer it or if you want to answer it. But so are you actually a member of the OTO, or do you study on your own, or how would you describe your own relationship to the OTO?
Okay, so yeah, that's no problem.
Okay.
So I have been active with an OTO body. They have a degree called Minerval that starts at 0. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of that is it's non-committal. So you can see what it's like. You can go through initiation, you can experience OTO and Thelema through the eyes of the OTO, just to kind of see how it is. The general idea is, do you like it? If you do, continue. And if you don't, it's cool if you get out. And then if you want to, you can go from there. Once you take your first degree onwards, they consider you a brother or sister for life, even if you like sort of retire, so to speak, from the OTO. So personally, I've been involved in Minerval just so I could kind of see what it was about. But beyond that, I wasn't involved. I went to plenty of events. I did participate in some of their rituals, and it was cool. The people were cool. It was really interesting from an anthropological perspective to see how this sort of thing works, and psychological, to see the effects on people, including myself. That's kind of what I wanted to do, was see what this is all about, because clearly there's some kind of pull to this. And so I understand, just from a sociological point of view, the kind of attractive group behavior in something like this. So I was really interested to see what that was about. So that's the extent of my involvement in the OTO. Mm-hmm. As far as AA goes, I am a solitary person when it comes to practicing, but again, it's still like the sort of Sam Harris approach, where like I'm suspending judgment or like honing it in the sense that like I'm fully aware that it's not literal. But there are AA groups out there. There's generally considered 2 main ones. I am not formally involved with either of them.
Okay. So would you say that you have reached any higher than a Minerval grade? Sounds like.
In OTO?
Well, yeah, in the OTO, yeah.
No.
Okay.
I stayed in Minerval just so I could respectfully participate and see what it was like, and then that's kind of where I stopped.
Okay. And so now does AA have pretty much the same system?
No, it's
okay.
Well, it's way different, but I would say the only thing they have in common is it is graded. So there's like 0, 1, 2, etc. Mm-hmm. So like with OTO, like I was saying, is more of the group thing, and AA is more of the solitary thing. So like if you decide to go with a sort of like a lineage approach in AA, there's 2, maybe 3 that are considered sort of legit as far as order of succession goes. But with AA, because it's so solitary, even in that sense, you only ever know the person above you that's like sort of helping you understand things and getting you to go through it properly, and that's it. Or if like once you get to be a certain grade, it's acceptable for you to take on people below you. So like that's how the cycle works. But so other than that, but like you don't know anyone else outside of that, and there's no group activity of any kind. It's just, here's what you need to study. Here's what I expect from you. I'll see you in 5 months or whatever, and then we'll check out, see how you've been doing. So yeah, it's way different outside of the grade structure. I mean, obviously it's still thelemic, but rituals and things like that are not the same at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So some people are saying they're hearing feedback and others aren't. I don't know. If there's any sound issues, let me know. But it sounds like maybe on one of the people who's watching's name is Zabora. Maybe that was on your end, Zabora. But if anybody's experiencing that, let me know. So now the big one. Yes. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and love is the law, love under will. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Right. So if you've ever seen the 93 slang being thrown around between Thelemites, that's what that stands for. So do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. These are all things out of the book of the law. So that's there's this concept in Thelema called true will. And generally that refers to what is supposed to be your path, your function as a person. Kind of not quite like destiny, but kind of like that. Mm-hmm. Basically an understanding of yourself and your sort of purpose or place in the world. And so that's the true will concept. So when you hear the love under will part, that's kind of what that's referring to. So let's see. It does start with, I wanted to pull up the book of the law here, but it didn't work out very well. Got too much crap going on in front of me. So love is the law. There's a lot of symbolism even in the language. So agape is love, and the 93 comes from the numerology of agape. It totals in 93. Same thing with will. So that's why people abbreviate it as 93, 93, 93. So that's kind of like the general salutation. And, when you meet another Thelemite, you say 93, or if you're in a more formal setting, you say the phrase that you just said. And then when you part, you say it again and the second part. So that's like the second set of 93s with a slash between them. This Ben person in the chat talking about the concept of love. That's pretty spot on, I would say. It's not love in like the typical English vernacular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so people are saying that they're hearing the feedback from me, so I've been kind of fiddling with the settings as we've been going along. So chat, let me know if can you still hear me, Ricky?
Yeah, you sound a little bit kind of more tinny, but I can still hear you just fine, like you're intelligible.
Okay, but I sound tinny, huh? That's not good.
Yeah, like you're further away from it, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, probably because I changed microphones because I was thinking that maybe I'm being picked up by the Skype, so I actually disabled that. So you're probably hearing a very faint version of me. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
It's really breathy. All right, I got to work out this whole sound issue. But so okay, good. So one of the things that I know that I've often encountered is, people will say that, for example, the Wicca read, like a lot of people say, now I can't even think of it, but
harm none.
Right, yeah. Harm none, do as you will. And people believe that comes from Thelema, and I was actually under that impression for a long time too.
Yeah.
But then somebody who's actually an OTO member, they actually explained it to me just like you did, explaining that first of all, when they're talking about will, agape, they're talking about, or did I say agape? Thelema. Which one is will?
Agape is the love.
Love. Okay, so Thelema, right? Which one is will?
They just leave that alone as far as I know.
Okay. Well, anyhow,
they just leave it as will.
Yeah, so they explained it to me basically that the version of will that's in the OTO is completely separate from the Wiccan read. Because the Wiccan read is actually talking about, what you want to do, and as long as you don't bother anybody, you're fine. But whereas in Thelema, it's more of the will of, like, what is your true purpose, who you truly are,
right.
Every man and woman is a star, that sort of concept.
Yeah.
So even though they sound similar, they're actually two completely different ideas and philosophies.
Yeah, it's I would completely agree with that. However, that general phrase, along with a lot of sort of the more British traditional Wiccan rituals and elements, do come from Crowley and his early stuff. They're sort of derivatives. And that's because of Gerald Gardner. Like, he had interactions with Crowley. So that's why you see that. You probably won't come across it in the more eclectic stuff where people kind of choose what they want for their practice. But a lot of, like, the formal rituals that you see in Brit Trad, like in the different British traditional lineages of witchcraft, do come from some form of roots that involved Crowley or Thelema. And Gerald Gardner, I can't remember for sure if Gardner was involved in this, but Crowley, before he was involved, like, created the OTO and developed Thelema and all that, he was a member of the Golden Dawn, which was a more, like, Christian focused group. I mean, not in the sense that, like, you're a Christian in, like, a Jesus kind of way, but, like, the iconography was only Christian.
Right. The Golden Dawn was very, very much based in Christian symbolism. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that's one reason there's a lot of overlap between those groups. I don't know why, but for some reason that does bother a lot of Wiccans, at least in my experience. Not sure why.
What bothers Wiccans?
That they have that in common. I mean, it's just my personal experience. So I'm not saying they're all like that, but
I
don't feel comfortable being associated with Crowley, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. There's actually, like, there's a meme that goes around, and it has, like, Aleister Crowley sitting there, and he's like, the typical one with the hat. He's got the hat.
Yeah.
He's kind of like got his hands there. He's got this crazy look, and it's and the thing is, I'm in your Wicca, scaring your dudes.
Yeah, I actually know the person who made that. Yeah, no, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's a funny one. Yeah, I don't want to suck up the time with this. I mean, I've done many videos on it. But yeah, there's a lot of material that Gardner pulled from Crowley. But as I'm sure that you're well aware, they only met towards the end of Crowley's life for 3 days in May 1947 when he was, holed up in that home in London, and he was, pretty much, he was on his deathbed. He was like, 6 months later he died. But, so Crowley had absolutely no interest in witchcraft, and, Gardner used a lot of material, as he claims, to fill in the gaps of the material that he was given from the New Force Coven. But anyhow, I don't want to suck up our time talking about that. I've done videos on it.
Sure.
So, and somebody had mentioned earlier about, I think a lot of people kind of get this confused. They believe that Aleister Crowley started OTO. And to my understanding, that's incorrect.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about with... Okay, so I think you and I might have talked about this before.
Okay.
So Crowley basically took over a fringe Masonic group that was the OTO. They were considered a clandestine lodge by mainline Freemasonry, which is basically, we disavow you because you're, like, straying so hardcore from what we teach that it's not cool. But he worked his way up through the ranks of that, and then once he got to the sort of top of things, he completely transformed it, and it was no longer even... I don't know. There's some Masonic elements to it, but it's barely recognizable. Mm-hmm. So there's George Cecil Jones is involved in that. So it's like, where do you want to draw the line with it's not clear where you want to draw the line with OTO as a formal organization when it comes to being thelemic. So what's the understanding that you have?
So my understanding is that Crowley joined OTO back in, I don't know exactly when, I'd have to look at my notes. But my understanding is that the Order Temple Orientis, as a body under that name, was in existence before Crowley joined it.
Yes.
Now, is that correct?
Yeah, that's
okay.
If I recall correctly, that's still what it was called in the early inception before, like while Crowley was kind of transforming it. I'm pretty sure that's what you're referring to.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, so that was my impression. That was my impression of it, and I forget exactly who. Again, correct me if the story is incorrect, but he was actually approached by a member of the Order Templi Orientis out of Germany, or maybe in England, I forget exactly which, but they were disturbed by Crowley because Crowley had published their material, and then it came to understand that Crowley didn't have access to their material. It was his creation, but it was very similar to the OTO, and so that's how he actually became aware of the OTO, and then he was offered to be initiated into the OTO. Now, do I have that wrong, or does that sound about right? Or
that sounds vaguely familiar. That might be the George Cecil Jones part of it.
Okay, I think it might be. Yeah. Yeah. So I may or may not have that whole like I said, I'm just going by memory, so I might have that wrong. Let me see. Oh yeah. So now we kind of touched on this earlier, but there's a funny story about passage of leadership after. Well, actually, let's talk a little bit about. You kind of touched a little bit about that, the influence of Aleister Crowley on the OTO and the thelema aspect of it. So when Crowley passed away in December of 1947, I know that there was a question about the leadership of the OTO at that time, especially the London Lodge. Do you know? Are you familiar with it?
I'm trying to remember. So, most of my involvement hasn't been with the sort of history of it, but I do have a vague concept of it. So, if I remember right, there was this sort of legal battle that ended up ensuing over the works of Crowley, and then so you had these mainly two competing groups that were trying to vie for the lineage succession. One of them, I think, ended up calling themselves the Typhonian OTO, I think is what it was, as a result of that. And the OTO that exists today was the one that sort of succeeded in presenting themselves in court, actually, as sort of the legit heir to Crowley's lineage. So it wasn't just an informal thing. They actually went to court over this.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm afraid to talk because they're getting feedback from me, so I don't know what to do. I keep fiddling with all these things.
Yeah, I can hear you. Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. That's great.
So go ahead.
Oh yeah, I guess the common one would be the whole Satanist thing. Like that's by far the most common misconception. I mean, really, the only reason for that is because of the iconography, I would say. Yeah, there's an affinity for the archetypical Lucifer and the sort of role that he played in Christian mythology, but that's the only reason I could think of. So like if you, let's say you weren't familiar at all with it, and you, especially if you are a Christian, and you look at it and you just come across one of many symbols that could kind of look like that, you're going to look, oh my God, this is satanic. So it's very easy to understand it that way, or I should say misunderstand it. But there's parts of rituals where it's like there's a hymn to Pan, I think, at some point, who looks a lot like what people that are familiar with the Bible or are Christians would probably interpret visually as some form of Satan or Lucifer. So yeah, there is symbolism, but it's just like the rest of the symbolism in it. So I would say it just stems from the person who's looking at it that way. It's their cultural background. So like if they have history with Christianity, they're probably going to look at it that way. So Ben is talking about magic in theory and practice. Let's see. Right. Yeah. So it's right. Exactly. It's not Satan in the common terminology. That's the thing with Thelema is overall it's sort of this mythos conglomerate. You know, it's not really. That's why a lot of Thelemites don't look at it literally, is my suspicion, because they realize it's coming from all over the place, and the usefulness of it is sort of in the mystical, archetypical, symbolic way. It's not this literal trying to mash things together awkwardness. So whoever this Ben person is seems to have a pretty good understanding of what's going on.
Right. So, okay. So I think what we'll do is, I guess we'll take questions from people. So if there's any questions, let me go back and see if we caught some of because I know people were asking questions as we went along. If you're hearing feedback from me, I apologize. I don't know what I can do about that. I'm just going to try to limit the amount of time that I speak. Let me see.
Let's see.
I'm just kind of going back through here. Let me see.
So Ben and Zabora are talking about priests and priestesses.
Okay.
I think they might. Let me make sure they're not talking about Wicca.
I think they were, because there was a discussion about Wicca and non-Wiccans.
I haven't met the, because there is a sort of, there's a priest in the sense of like in the EGC there's priests. But outside of that, no. Yeah, it looks okay. It's a conversation in Wicca.
So that's a good question. So as people go up the grade, how many grades are in the OTO? Is it?
Well, known, I think it's 11.
Okay.
Outside of Minerval. Yeah.
Okay. So each one of those titles, now would you address somebody as that title? Or would they just be?
No, and
okay.
No, and it's considered taboo to discuss grade numbers amongst members. So like I would be very surprised if someone was like openly talking about that in any OTO setting. It's kind of like that's your personal thing, and you know you shouldn't. It's kind of taboo because it's to discourage people from sort of creating these, you know, in groups where you kind of like, oh, I'm better than you kind of thing, I think is the general impression I get. So yeah, nobody really talks about the grade. And even if I've seen people ask others what their grade is, and they won't tell them. So, yeah, it's kind of like an ego check.
I kind of like that. I think that's actually pretty good because I know in Wicca there's kind of like this your first degree, second degree, third degree. It's like, there is a bit of ego. I think. And
sure.
I think it's kind of nice to be able to take that out and put that into check. Basically, you're just like anybody else. It's just that maybe you've reached whatever. You've reached certain plateaus in your practice, but it doesn't mean that you're. You know what I mean? I mean, it just kind of basically just takes that whole ego part of it, because we can get into our ego. We can say, oh well, I've been practicing for X amount of time, or I reached this degree, or I have this, or some people they like to collect membership. Like they'll say, I'm a member of the Golden Dawn, the OTO, the AA. They just rattle it all off, and it's like, so how do you practice all those?
Oh, and on top of that, this is interesting / kind of scary sometimes.
Right.
So like occasionally you'll have people show up to like your group and claim to be like a really high degree, and usually like the crazier it gets is like the higher degree it is. Like I think at one point there was someone that showed up and like claimed to be the like direct spiritual successor of Crowley himself. We're like, no, just get out. So yeah, no,
Ipsimus Junior.
Right. So that one was particularly laughable.
Or maybe like sub Ipsimus.
Right, yeah, that was pretty much what this guy was claiming. It's like, nope, you gotta go.
Yeah, I mean, well, I actually appreciate that about that. I think that's a good thing to be able to pull that out, pull that ego part out. Let me see.
Yeah, it keeps the more fraternal aspect going. People don't get all divided about it.
Yeah, because it's easy to do that. Let's see. So I'm just kind of like going over some other questions that we might have missed. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I will, either myself or Ricky will try to capture them and answer them for you. So just kind of like going over some of the notes that we've gone through. I think we pretty much touched on everything. But is there anything that you'd like to mention or talk about that you feel would be good?
Let me see. I mean, I could talk about some personal experience if you want.
That sounds fine. Yeah. And like I said, I'm keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have any questions, just type them in there. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I can't discuss some parts of it just out of respect for the grade system. But it was the people I've been involved with, like, met through and interacted with in the OTO. They've all been really cool to me. They've been great. I was initiated in a lodge, and then I did get involved with I was like a distant member of a body because I lived at far away enough from a main body at the time that there's this sort of like, if you live X number of miles or kilometers away from the nearest body, it's acceptable to have this sort of distant affiliation. So I had that. And then I was involved with a local group, and it wasn't just exclusively Thelemites though, because some of the core people that were in like the original group of, I think there was only like maybe 5 of us, and there was two of them were actually British traditional. They were Gardnerians, and one of them was a Gardnerian and a Thelemite. And so we started this local group online. It really quickly blew up. I mean, it got out of control. We used to, and not in a bad way, we used to like have it in a dedicated space in a house. And it became so successful that we ended up having to move it to an actual like rented location. And then the last I heard, they actually gained Oasis status, which is the sort of introductory level of being a body of OTO. So all those people, great experience with, very cool, interesting group. And it's always interesting to see how people interpret the book of the law. Because one of the core things in Thelema is you are not only to interpret it in your own way, but you are not to tell other people or even discuss it in a way that they should interpret it. Mm-hmm. So it's not even that you should tell people how to interpret it. It's also you shouldn't even bring it up. Like it says right in the book of the law, like don't even discuss it. Just keep it to yourself. It's that personal. So I thought that was really cool. That seems to keep it sort of personal, meaningful, but also you still have like this loose bonding with other people that look at it. And it also seems to combat a lot of splintering that you see in like major world religions. You know, like you have like the Protestant split just like fractured all over the place. And I think one of the reasons that doesn't happen in Thelema so much is because of things like that. So that was interesting. The original way I came across it, so I used to work in a bookstore, and I was reshelving books in the occult section. And there was a anniversary edition of the Book of the Law. So it was like real, like embellished, like fancy looking. And I had never heard of it. So I looked at it because it's kind of like plain other than the title. I thought, oh, what is this? You know, it has like is very like high quality because it was the special printing. And so I kind of looked at it later on after I got off of work that day and ended up buying it because I thought it was cool. It was very prosaic and I didn't know what it meant at all. It was just like just looks fun to read, like I'm reading it and it feels good. And then I looked into what it was from there. And sort of over time, I got more involved. So I lived in a different area for a while, near a major college campus. And when I would get off of work, on my way from work to where I would catch public transit, there was a major chain bookstore. And so I would occasionally walk in there, kill time, before the transit system showed up. And I frequently just would walk through the occult section, see what was there, what they had, because it's this newfound thing to me. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I've never been exposed to this before. And after a while, just from doing that out of habit, the staff kind of got to know me. And then finally, I was eventually approached by one of them asking me, they said, hey, there's actually a lot of pagans and other occultists on staff here. And we do like a group, like book reading, like a book club. You can come if you want. I thought, oh, great. And it was a good size. It was probably like at least 30 people. Met a Golden Dawn guy through that. He kind of showed me where to look for the more, he basically helped me figure out what I was kind of like more into, what my interests were. And that's kind of how I, fell more into like the thelemic category as far as personal interest goes. After that, I kind of stayed involved just as far as reading and keeping up with things goes, but I didn't really, do anything formal for years and years. And then finally, I had lived somewhere else and I thought, I wonder what's going on with this, if this is still a thing. So I just pulled up a couple of websites to see if there was anything in my area. And there was like a major body, like a lodge, like, I don't even know, like 10 minutes away or something like that from where I was. So I contacted the body. It just happened to be a major thelemic holiday was coming up. And there's certain parts of the OTO that are cool with public stuff, people being publicly there. I emailed them and I was like, hey, this is my situation. Is it cool if I show? What's the deal? And they were welcoming. They were very cool. They let me come and participate and view certain parts of it, and kind of went from there. I took my Minerval from a separate group, but that's how I got to know the OTO and Thelema. And then I don't personally, like I said earlier, I don't do the group stuff so much just because of the way I'm interested in it. But yeah, that's sort of how I found it interesting and still do. And it's more of like, so like I'm not, it's even less so with me with Wicca or witchcraft. So I do have an occult book collection that's pretty rare, a lot of the books in it. And that's because I have a more academic interest in this stuff than a personal one. Obviously, I can make it mean personal things to me, like I was talking about before, and that's kind of a different aspect as to why it interests me. But overall, if I had to describe my involvement or interest in the occult in general, or any of these specific groups or Thelema, it's way more academic. So I find it interesting on how it plays off people's psychology and the involvement in the group. So that's sort of my backstory as far as how I came to know all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it is. No way.
Yeah, Carrie and Shane are in the chat.
Oh, cool.
So I think it is interesting. I think that you and I talked a little bit about this before the show, and I noticed that especially one of the people I like on YouTube, Rita, who does really nice artwork. We were talking about all the wicked laws, and it's very interesting how people take belief systems. I don't like to call them religions, more like belief systems or philosophies, and they turn them into dogma, which some people can do.
Right.
Some people can take a very dogmatic approach to it, but in my opinion, a lot of these paths, a lot of these philosophies, viewing life, how you interpret life, is very much an individualistic plan. It's an individualistic way of approaching things. And if I'm trying to live the way that somebody else interprets it, I'm going to get frustrated with it because it's no longer my own. And I think that that's where a lot of people get confused with some belief systems, is that they believe that it's like Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Buddhism or it's this very much this dogma that first you have to follow. And no, that's not. A lot of these occult paths, occult philosophies begin with the individual. The individual finds essentially their own path. What you do is you climb it and you build and you create your own. And if you're not creating your own individualistic path and you're sort of following someone else's and you stay following that person, you're no longer following your own path. You're now following so-and-so's path.
Yeah, and it's not going to mean this, like it's not going to have the same level of meaning to you. Right. Right, and also I should say another reason I think there's this sort of antagonism towards dogma or dogmatic thinking, not just in Thelema but the occult in general, at least from what I've witnessed, is because a lot of people that are involved in it, especially in the United States, are former Christians. So they're extremely turned off by dogma just in general, right off the bat. So that's why one of the reasons they seem to be attracted to this sort of thing is because they quickly notice that it's not really dogmatic at all. So the people that know me outside of, the sort of occult stuff that we've talked about and the more common things I'm involved in online, they know that I've been some form of atheist my entire life. And so because I have that, sort of unusual background or viewpoint on things, I've never been like involved in a religion. So I don't have the sort of resistance to, say, Christian iconography I don't like dogma, but it's not in the same way where it's like this, like, I don't know if it's fair to say this, but you'll get what I'm saying. In like a more of a rabid sense. So I dislike it, but it's not like in like a make you cringe kind of way. It's just kind of like, okay, it's not for me. But I think that's also partially why I myself look at it from sort of the academic level or perspective is because it's like, just because of my secular background and the fact that I'm an atheist and an anti-theist, I look at this like, this is really cool. I love to like see the effects it has on myself and other people. And for that reason, I can appreciate it. And a lot of it is beautiful. So I think that helps inform my perspective on this entire thing. But yeah, I do think a lot of the opposition to the dogma does come from the fact that most people, especially in the United States, are already Christians. And then if they break out of it for something like this, that means they're formally Christian. So they have that sort of background that they're going to have that resistance to the sort of more dogmatic view on things just naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much I want to say, but I don't want to say it because I noticed that the chat is talking about an echo, and I don't know how to fix it, so I don't want to frustrate people. But yeah,
maybe type it.
You type it. Type a whole comment. I'm not going to do that. But let me see if there's any questions people have. We will definitely answer them. Let me see. They're just talking amongst themselves. But if there's any specific questions people have about stuff, let us know. I don't know what to do about that echo. That's very frustrating. So my apologies for that. But I think there was one thing I wanted to just comment on what you had talked about atheism. I think that for myself, I grew up in a home where the closest we had to any religion that was kind of pushed on me was Unitarianism. So you know what I mean. So it was right. It was pretty much almost atheism, but with a belief in God. So it was always it was never really pushed on me. I didn't grow up in a very religious home, so my mother was an anthropologist, so we were very free to kind of find our own beliefs and our own ideas, and I automatically grew up with the idea of evolution because I saw the fossils, I was very aware of it and saw how tribes and people and acted and stuff like that. So when I began to think about a concept of a monotheistic deity, which was the common belief, in my school and my neighbors and all that, I sort of formed my own belief. And so I had kind of like an idea of a monotheistic deity for a while, and then that began to sort of fade away, and then I kind of got into the idea of archetypes and Jungian archetypes, and then that sort of led me into a more atheistic belief, because I began to interpret deities and deity itself as like an archetype. And that's how I began to kind of formulate my philosophy of it, my ideology of it. So,
very cool.
Yeah, so I think it's really good to start with a secular base. I think that's one thing that society should strive for, is a secular base, and allow the individual to believe, find their own ideas path. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the great things about America is it's basically a secular nation. Right. Whether or not people want to admit it or not, it's secular. And I think that's one thing that hopefully will catch on worldwide, especially in other parts of the world where
right.
They have monotheistic deities that encourage killing infidels. Hopefully they will adopt that form of secular.
There's hope, I think, in the Kurds. I'm willing to bet on that.
Yeah, but I think it's also going to come down to. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of fundamentalists, and I'm talking about both Christians and Muslims, are very much against apostate. They're very much against people, getting away from their religion, questioning.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I might have a clue as to why that you're getting the echo.
Oh, okay, good.
When I see you on Skype, I see you watching the video that has me and you side by side, but when I'm looking at it on YouTube on my end, it's just me.
Right.
On the screen.
Right. I know, I have. Yes, exactly. I have two cameras, but I have one mic source. So, for example.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if that would help.
No. That's okay. No, I appreciate it. So let me begin on.
Someone's saying, did you mute the speaker on the YouTube page on your computer? To you.
Oh, yes, the video. I think so, but let me double check. That is muted. Yep. Looks like it. So let me just go over my settings. Okay, so for example, I have Skype, and on Skype I have. See the tools, options. I have for audio. I have it coming from my microphone, which is a Logitech wireless headset, which is this one right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shane is saying maybe refresh the website. I don't know. You have more experience with this than I do.
Well, could be, but I mean, no, believe me, if I'm having problems, I'll take all the help I can get. I am not a person who's going to say, "Oh, I know. You can't teach me anything." Okay, so then on OBS, I have the microphone auxiliary audio device as Logitech wireless headset. So I have
you're wearing headphones around your neck? Is that mic maybe picking up the other set?
I hope not, because this is the set right here. It shouldn't be. I hope not. But let me disable the one on the OBS.
Okay.
And let me see. Do you still hear me, Ricky?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you.
So let me, so in the chat, let me know if you can still hear me, or Ricky, maybe I was picking it up twice. Maybe I was picking it up in Skype and also in OBS. So let me know if you guys can't hear me now, because Ricky's still picking me up on Skype. Okay, good. So now the echo's gone. Yay! Perfect.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks, Ricky. I appreciate that.
Ben says, oh, sure. Ben says, wouldn't a theocratic Christian government actually benefit the occult community? After all, if they're persecuting witches, then that would drive the rebels toward alternatives.
That's interesting.
No. The more secular society, the more peaceful it's going to be for not just the non-religious, but the religious as well.
Yeah.
So I think you would just get, the pendulum would swing in the opposite direction and you're just going to get warring factions. I don't know. I think that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Ricky. I think that history has shown that the more secular society is, the more freedom it has, and I think that is the best way to do it. I think that religion and government, politics, need to be absolutely separate. Education system needs to be completely separate. They need to be completely separate entities. I think that is the best way to do it. Because we've had situations where people have killed people obviously this is 400 years ago, killed people under the belief of practicing witchcraft in a Christian nation. The same thing happens today in Sudan, in Syria, where people are killed for believing in practicing witchcraft or communing with jinns, as they call it. And even in Christian parts of Africa, I think there was, in Zimbabwe, there were some children who were believed to have been practicing witchcraft.
Oh yeah, okay, so this will be interesting. So I do know a few people that are from Africa, and there are witches there, and they are like legit, like more like sort of like Haitian voodoo or hoodoo. Right. It's not like the occult version in the West at all. They're they do not. You don't want to admit to that. Like that's a great way to just get killed by Muslims.
Yeah.
That's because they take that seriously in the same way that like a very long time ago Christians used to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And,
I don't know how serious the practitioners were. I mean, maybe it was just like, the phrase witch hunt, where it was just like some people practicing like a strange form of herbal medicine or something, and then the Christians looked at their Bibles and went, "Hey, this describes this witch," but now it's like modern, and this is going on in Africa. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. No, from my understanding, from what I read in an article, and they were just giving the information from it, and I think they were burned. I think they were burned for being witches. But it was like during the time of the witch craze in Europe. They were believed to be practicing witchcraft. They did something and caused witchcraft. But as for whether they were actually practicing some kind of shamanistic African black magic or whatever, the article really didn't go into that. It just said that they were accused of it. So that's what I'm going by. But I mean, either way, either if they are practicing it or they aren't practicing it, I don't think murder is the solution to that. Yeah. I mean, at least in Iceland back, 400 years ago, people were excommunicated for practicing witchcraft. I think that that's better. I mean, depending on the culture.
Sure, people can kick you out of their group, but as long as they don't hurt you.
I mean, but
or like bar you from parts of society.
Right. But even excommunication back in the day was a lot more worse than it is today, because if you were excommunicated out of your community back then, where would you go? The only place you could go is to other places that are probably going to be hostile to you.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much a death sentence too. But
you can band together with the other apostates.
Exactly. Create your little apostate state. So people keep talking about echo. I don't know. All right. I've given up on it.
Give up.
Yeah. So let me see. So yeah, well, this was really fun. Just kind of make sure that we touched on all the things. I'm going to go back through and see if there's any questions that I missed.
Yeah, definitely would not or would like to answer any questions.
Yeah, let's see. Rita says shows everyone hears without showing voice in there. Yeah, I think that everybody should be able to share their opinions. I agree with that. That's one thing I like to do on my channel, is give everybody an opportunity to share what they believe, even if I don't agree with them. Obviously, if somebody's just being a jackass, obviously I'll kick them out of the chat, but if they have a difference of opinion, I'm not going to kick them out.
I have to say, I really respect your format. Like when you have in Hangouts and like with people talking and taking their turns and that sort of thing. The formality of it, I really like that. I think it's really productive and respectful of everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, to me it makes it a little more sterile because it's not as free-flowing, but it kind of helps to kind of keep the conversation flowing, especially when you have 6 people in the chat at once and everybody's trying to talk. Yeah, so thank you. Let me see. Okay, himself fairly racist. So Ben was saying, Crowley himself was fairly racist and anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
now, have you ever come across that, or
the only thing I've seen? I mean, I don't know, as far as biographical wise, but just his general writings. He has used words to describe those groups that today we would find racist or anti-Semitic, or at least offensive. But, it was forever ago, and that was sort of the common vernacular. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's possible. I mean, I don't really know from his personal life if he was, but as far as his mainstream writings for Thelema or for OTO guidance and that kind of thing, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, for myself, I've never come across anything that I would consider to be racist in Crowley's writings. I know that obviously he worked with the Kabbalah very much. He worked with Jewish mysticism, Jewish writings. So I wouldn't believe that he was
Yeah.
anti-Semitic. As for racist, yeah, I mean, I think that there are terms today I think also today we're becoming, our sensitivity to it is growing, which has two benefits. I mean, it has two side effects. It has one that's sort of beneficial that makes people more sensitive to it, but it also puts it at the extreme where it becomes so tense and it becomes counterproductive. I think that there's a happy medium to understand that I think that there's two extremes to that. And I think it's good on one hand because people are being sensitive to it, but I think on the other hand, it can be taken to an extreme where it's like, you say one thing and it's like, it's blown out of proportion and automatically you're a Nazi racist who hates everyone. It's like, whoa.
Okay, slow down.
Hold on a second there. That's not what I meant.
There's definitely a balance where, you can be respectful but not crazy about it. So Ben says, Crowley was English and made Thelema with Western traditions and biases in mind. I don't know if I would agree with that. There's a lot of Eastern mysticism in Thelema, and from what I can tell, it's legit. It's not like modified really a whole lot. I mean, he incorporates it, so like, especially in like the meditation aspect, like if you go along with the sort of Vedic meditation practices that are in AA specifically, it's brutal. I mean, it's legit. It's not like something peaceful or something you encounter in the West normally. It's like historically accurate, sort of positions and that sort of thing. Now, he would take the reason for doing those and change them a little bit, but as far as the practices themselves, he didn't really alter a whole lot. And they're definitely, I don't even know. There's something else. They're not relaxing in the sense that it's like, you feel calm, but they are relaxing in the sense that it kicks everything else out of your mind because all you can focus on is your sort of physical strain at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
I saw your comment. Yes, there are black Wiccans.
Yeah, so now I heard an echo on your end from me, but that's okay.
Oh.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there are Wiccans from all walks of life. Yeah. So, I mean, there's actually been a joke. There's people who want to start covens in like Japan. And so there was, so there was a question about how the material would be translated into Japanese, and because a lot of the material would be I mean, this is just internal Gardnerian bullshit that people worry about, but just like, okay, well, if you do translate it into almost a completely different language, what meaning gets translated with it, and is that changing, quote unquote, the core text? So, I don't think.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was just going to say, I don't think Thelema will ever run into that, just because the Book of the Law is very clear on how you should never alter a single letter of the entire book.
Really?
Like, that's just unacceptable. Yeah. And every copy I've ever seen of the Book of the Law includes the original facsimile, like scans of the handwritten original version from Crowley. So like if someone's messed with it, you could easily compare it.
That's interesting because I always wondered about that because my copy has that too. It has the scanned copies of Aleister Crowley's writings, and I thought that they just put that in there for reference. But it's actually because...
No, it's it's to curb that. Well, also, this is interesting. I don't know what the status of this is because it's been a minute since I heard about it, but there was one word, and I'm trying to remember what it was, where people had thought that it had said a particular word in Crowley's handwriting. And then they looked at it closer and compared it to his other like handwriting samples, and they're like, wait a minute, it looks like this, because his handwriting is not exactly the clearest. And it altered one of the key things. Like, man, I wish I could remember what it was. I think it was part of. Oh, I want to say it was part of doing Resh, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a sun salutation. Mm-hmm. So what you do is there's different there's slightly different versions of what you say and do, but in general, there's sort of, and this comes a lot from American Indian practice. So you do one for when the sun comes up in the morning, you do solar midday, you do sunset, and you do midnight. And so you face the sun, you do certain symbols or signs with your body, and you recite these lines. And I think it was within one of the Resh salutations where one of the words was like, wait a minute, do we not see this all this time? And so that was like this kind of like big thing for a while. And then I think the resolution ended up being, it doesn't matter enough you can just say it however you want, I think is the last I heard of it. But yeah, they're very big on don't mess with our stuff.
Well, I did not know that. Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's one of, I think it's, there's always a fine line between what needs to remain dogmatic and that which needs to be non-dogmatic. And I think it can be difficult because you sort of understand, well, if we allow it to be just like this free-for-all, they could change everything and everything, what's going to happen in like 100 years, right, will be completely different. And, so, yeah. I think
that was the way of sort of curbing it. That was like, okay, we need to something centralize everything, but we're not going to like let or tell people how to interpret it. So I think that was the sort of middle ground for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's good. So that you could take like the core text of it, but as for interpretation of it, it's still left up to the individual. And I think there was I think that there's been I've heard question about that too, because obviously they have writings from Gerald Gardner, and there's, and then they interpret the writings of Gerald Gardner and, the photocopy of it or whatever they have of it, and they're looking at it, and then like maybe there's like an edge of a letter that's cut off, or, I mean, his handwriting wasn't all that great too, so you kind of like look at one word and say, is it love, or is it like, or is it look? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's kind of like, what is he actually saying here? And you can kind of interpret it differently, and it can change the whole meaning of the writings. But again, I think that's kind of like, that's becoming too dogmatic about it.
Yeah.
But some people are like adamant about it, say, no, whatever, it has to be this, it has to be that,
Right.
And,
do you have the ability to display pictures, like, to the audience?
Yes, I do. If you send it to me, if you send it to me, yeah, if you have a way you can send it to me, I don't have my email open. I have that closed, so you'd have to.
I could send it to you in DM if that works.
Oh, through Skype?
No, on Twitter.
Okay, that'll work. I'll try to do it, sure.
Okay. Let's pull it up here. There's you. Here we go. Okay, so this is slightly, well, I'll wait till you get it pulled up.
So they're really talking about cultures and race.
Yeah, I was trying to catch that, but I couldn't quite get the full context of it. Okay, so it looks like it worked.
Okay, so let me go over to Twitter.
I closed. Oh, I didn't. I still have Twitter open. Let me see if I got
from your message. Sent a photo. Here it is. So let me see if I can.
save this. Oh, I have to save the link. I want to save it. There we go.
And this is slightly altered, so it doesn't need to be censored in any way. You can just show it as is.
Okay. All right, so let's see if I can do this and get people to see this. So that is not the image. Add the file to it. Why is it not in here? It's not showing up. I've had problems with Twitter images before.
What I've done is if I go to right click and save it in the DM, it doesn't tend to work, but if I click on it and then save it from there, I don't know if that's what's going on.
Okay, well I had to click on messages, and then once I click on messages, I went to save image as.
So I click on, I'm doing it like I send it to you. So I see it in the DM. Instead of right clicking and saving it from there, you can kind of click on it and then it pulls it up by itself. And then if I right click and save it, it works.
Okay, let me try that.
That makes sense.
I think so. I think I understand. Okay, so if I go to the direct message and I have your direct message here, and instead of opening, so I don't open the direct message, right?
Oh no, open the direct message and then instead of right clicking on the image that's actually in the chat, click on it, single click.
Okay.
The white hand, and then it'll make it just the image, it'll kind of pop out from the chat.
Okay, got that.
Yeah, and then usually you can right click on that and save it.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes be careful too, because Twitter will want to sometimes occasionally make instead of .jpg, it'll be .jpg/large or dash large, and that screws it up. Okay. So just get rid of the large part.
Okay. So let me try this again.
Because your operating system might hide it depending on your settings.
Okay. So just change it to JPEG image.
Yeah, just .jpg.
Won't let me change that to that. JPEG. Yeah, no, it won't let me. I think it's in there. Let me see.
Okay. As long as it works.
Well, I don't know yet. I'll find out. Yep. Looks like I got it.
Cool. All right.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I have to resize it. All right. There we go. So now everybody should be seeing it. So we're looking at it. I don't know if you can see it on your end, if you can see it on YouTube.
I'm refreshing the YouTube page, and I'm getting... Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Yeah, I had to resize it.
That's fine. Okay, so this is my personal weapon kit. They call them magical weapons. With the exception to the Athame. The blade is different because that's considered a sort of personal thing that you don't show anyone else. But so you have on the upper right of the inside of the box is the Book of the Law. Mm-hmm. And that's a specific version that you are given by OTO, like once you take your Minerva. Like you can't go buy that somewhere. The wand is going from the lower left to the upper right. Mm-hmm. The substitute A thame is underneath of it going the opposite direction, which is a ritual knife if you're not familiar with that. And then underneath is the disc, and it's hard to see, but there's actually a pentagram inscribed on it.
Oh, okay.
And then the chime in the back is sort of signifier for different parts of the ritual, like to indicate things, because there's not a lot of talking in almost all the rituals, so it's kind of a coordination thing. And then you just have the magician tarot card just tucked in the upper left there. That's not Crowley's deck, the Thoth deck, but
right, that's
it's
the deck.
Yeah. So a little bit different. I replaced some things, but that's the general kit for most Thelemites, I would say.
Okay. And now,
so I thought people would see that.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm assuming that these 4 magical weapons, actually, there's 3 magical weapons. Do they correspond to the suits of the tarot deck, or is it different?
I wouldn't say that, but maybe, and it's just something I don't know. So like in a higher grade or.
Okay, so maybe actually, do they correspond to maybe the magician's tools?
Yes.
Okay.
So like if you look, I don't know if you could see it on the table there, but there's a theme for sure. So in Thelema, you are a magician. It's not like a rank thing. So the wand is more for, so like there are elemental representations. Just I think they're the same way in Wicca. So you have the wand is like there's fire, the dagger or whatever, thame, whatever you want to call it, air, all that stuff. Disc is earth, that sort of thing. So those are the main functions. Now, some people feel comfortable using different things than more commonly, the way they're more commonly used. So for example, I personally, when I draw pentagrams in the air for certain rituals, I tend to use the thame instead of the wand. I think that personally I find that more fitting, but just one of the many examples of how you can customize things for your own psychological benefit.
All right. Should I go out of the screen now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty much the same way in Wicca and I want to say Golden Dawn, but I know there was a question about the Golden Dawn between the wands and the swords as to fire and air. I think that there was some people associate wands with fire, some people associate swords with fire. So it's kind of So it's kind of interesting. There's that one little switch there. But
there is, by the way, there is a certain point where when you in OTO where, and I would imagine maybe I don't know, where you do need a sword, and you have to make it.
Okay.
Is generally the thing.
Interesting.
I had something else that I thought you might find interesting. Let me see if I can.
Another image?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I can. If this is going to be a problem, it's no problem.
I don't think it'll be a problem. As long as you do the same thing, it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
So I noticed in the chat that they're talking back and forth about stuff. Ben is saying recognized Chinese Taoism is most suitable for those who are Chinese or Japanese Shintoism. So it sounds like he's talking about how cultures best suited to their own cultures. I wonder what shifty risk means. Okay, Rita.
I'm typing out the answer right now.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't know what she was talking about.
It's risky shift just means the tendency for people to alter their behavior in a way that's more, not dangerous, that's too specific, deviant is the way I would put it, when you're in a group of people. So like something you would normally do, but you're in a group of some kind and they're engaging in something and you feel the social pressure to do it, and you kind of feed off of each other, and then you all kind of do something that you all would not normally do, kind of creates this pattern. So like you see that with like, if a riot breaks out in a crowd, that's kind of what that is.
So
it's just a play.
Is it like mob mentality?
Not necessarily. It generally refers to an external social force that gets you to behave in a way that you typically would not, like on your own.
I mean, I find it interesting that people will. I mean, obviously we're social creatures. So we tend to adopt or conform our own beliefs to the group's beliefs. So if you are a part of a group that holds a certain belief, chances are it's going to be a twofold response to it. First of all, you're probably going to believe what they believe because you're part of that group, and it's like social reinforcement. But you're also drawn to that because you believe those things. Now, if you get to a stage in your life where you find yourself moving away from those beliefs, it can be very difficult because you're still holding on to those old beliefs, and that's still part of your social structure. So it becomes more difficult to, even though in the back of your mind you might think differently, it's a little more difficult to actually break away from that and actually express your own beliefs because they're going to be contrary to your group, and you don't want to be, excommunicated from that group. That's one thing I see. Then the other one is that sort of mob mentality. Like, for example, the Berkeley riots that happened, talking about the one that happened when Milo Yiannopoulos was going to be speaking. And you had a lot of these people who they call Antifa people who were, wiggling the fence, starting fires. But there was a point where they pointed to a guy and they said, he's a Nazi. And they all attacked this guy. They don't know. I don't know if this guy was a Nazi. They may have just assumed that he was. And all it takes is somebody saying that person's a Nazi. And they all like lemmings attack this person. I mean, that's the same thing happened with the witchcraft trials. She's a witch. Burn her. He's a Nazi. And that is the most frightening thing that I can think of in mob mentality is that people no longer have agency. They're now dependent upon the larger group and assuming that whatever the larger group believes. I mean, that's the scariest part for me because that sort of mob mentality. You're no longer thinking as an individual. You're just part of this collective. That's to me that's frightening.
Without going too off topic, because this is definitely a hot button issue that I've discussed on other streams, but there's not really much of an element of free will in people in the first place. So it not only is it something maybe that all you know just because you've been surrounded by people that think that way, but I can tell you just from living all over that very quickly you start to unintentionally absorb the practices and behaviors of other people. Like, you don't even notice it a lot of the times. But this term is more like, it's not like a long-term thing. It's like kind of like an impulsive or like a single instance thing. So like, for an example, I used to be involved in a secular organization on a university campus, and there was a person who would regularly come there because it's a state university, so it's open campus. And they were well known because they were there all the time. And they would, go through their usual screaming horrible, offensive things out of the Bible. And most people would just kind of uncomfortably walk past this guy. They wouldn't say anything. You could tell that they wanted to, but they're like, eh. And then one time we showed up and we're watching this, and then one of the people in the group from like my group like gets in his face about it, not in like a physically aggressive way, but just like I'm gonna confront you on this. Mm-hmm. And the whole group of like other people not involved around just like turned on this dude, like, yeah, fuck this guy. And, they just went off on him. But that's kind of an example of it, is like normally those people weren't willing to engage in that behavior. Mm-hmm. But wait a minute, here comes somebody that's like okay with that. And then the tides turn really fast. And so like that's kind of, it's hard to it's easy to confuse for like a mob mentality because of the number of people that did it. But that's kind of what it is. It's a circumstantial thing where it's like, it's almost kind of like peer pressure. So like if you typically like a law-abiding citizen or whatever, and then you're hanging out with some people and they're like, hey, you want to do this illegal activity? And you're like, why not? Because you're with other people and you feel that social pressure. So anyway, that's all that is.
Yeah. I actually got into, I think it was actually your talk with Carrie. And the topic of free will came up, and there was this guy in the chat room who he and I got into an argument about it because I disagreed, and I think he shared the same position as you, and I wouldn't consider that free will, but that's just semantics, I think, because I think that everyone has free will. Period, but I agree with you that people do tend to follow. They can. What's the best way to describe it? It's not really a mob mentality, but yeah, I agree with you. They will sort of act in a way that they normally, as an individual, wouldn't do. Like, for example, yelling at that guy, and even sometimes getting violent with people. If you see somebody who's committing an act of violence or is aggressive with somebody, it's much easier for you to not interfere with that and say, hey, why are you hitting this guy? Or why are you being so violent towards them? So it's a lot easier to actually go along with that and say that whoever this person who's suffering that abuse must somehow deserve it because of the group that you're in. And that again is very scary to me. And I've experienced that a lot. And it's very disturbing that people will they won't question the group. They'll just assume that the group is somehow but it is very much like a mob mentality. It's how we socially interact. And one thing that I've also noticed, which is rather disturbing, is the action between male and females around this same type of situation, where a female will be aggressive or yelling at somebody or violent towards somebody, and the males will immediately feel justified in sort of protecting and standing up for the female and jumping involved in that. And I think that's something that is disturbing too, because then you take in two parts of it. You're taking in the mob mentality part, and also the quote unquote male instinctive reaction to be protective and to be the tough guy around women. You know what I mean by that?
And I've seen similar things in real life, but it's like the way I thought of it was like, okay, I have zero context for this. Like, for all I know, she could have just like stole his kid, or or something like that. Exactly. So hands off. Now, if I see something obvious, like it's never okay to just beat the shit out of somebody, like in front of people like that. So that's different. But if it's just like a screaming match or something that's kind of disturbing, I'm not, I'm not going to screw that up or get involved in that. But, so there's I hope I don't mess this up, but there's a good example of this is, I think it was the Bay of Pigs. Mm-hmm. JFK was talking amongst his sort of high-ranking officials about what to do, and all the people were giving their input, and it goes down really bad. And then later on, this one guy who hadn't said anything, he was like, "Yeah, I thought that was a terrible idea." And Kennedy asked him, was like, "Why didn't you say anything?" Right. And the reason he didn't is because he didn't feel comfortable saying, an opposing position in front of all these other like really high-ranking officials. So that's the effect of social pressure. I don't think it's possible to completely escape psychologically your surroundings of, like other people's behavior like that. You might have a little bit of wiggle room in that, but as far as like going completely against it, because you can't, because if you do that, like you talked about earlier, where you get sort of ousted from the tribe, it's like you need other people to survive, so you're not going to do anything that pisses off everyone around you. So, but anyway.
Yeah. But again, I think that there are people. I think there's some people who it's easier for them to fall into that pattern, and then there's some people who it's easier to go along with that. Meaning that I think that there are individuals who do see it for what it is, and they might not necessarily jump in and try and break it up and save the guy, but they're not going to participate in it because they have that sort of they have that sort of internal awareness that is not influenced by the group. And then there's some people who just like blindly just jump in the group. I think it's just a different personality types. For myself, I often see I have my own very strong belief systems, and I can see what I believe to be right or wrong in many situations, and that's what I focus on. So.
Yeah. Well, and this is it's interesting, the segue here. So like, if anyone sees my Twitter bio, one thing that I like to say, and I say it in there, is the internet is the ring of Gyges. And if you're not familiar with that, just quickly, it's a story within Plato, and the gist of it is there's this ring, and if you put it on, it makes you invisible. Sound familiar? But the question is, will men remain ethical when they wear this thing? And I see the internet as a pretty good example of that, because people behave way different online usually than they do, especially with the anonymous part of it. Like if you're just an avatar or something, than they would ever behave in sort of the outside world. And that's kind of like one thing that I try and promote just through my own behaviors, in general. And I slip up occasionally, but in general, I try and avoid conflict of any kind that either A, doesn't concern me, or, B, something I wouldn't say to someone in real life. Apparently I'm gaining this reputation. I mean, I guess I don't mind it, of sort of resolving things between people, because apparently, I guess, like over time, word has got around that I get people to unblock other people. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I'm like this third party, but like I didn't intend to do that.
You mean you're not blocked by Steve Shives?
I am, but that's
I thought so.
Intentional. Well, here's the thing: is he didn't block me for anything. Like, how he's got this block list or everything. It was none of that. The reason he blocked me is because I think it might have been Devin Tracy. Maybe someone said something like,
"Sounds good enough." In Steve's world, at least.
Yeah, it was someone on YouTube was in one of their videos said, when they were talking about this, were like, you could say to Steve, I respectfully disagree with your opinions on feminism, and he would block you. So just as a joke, like right when I first opened this account, I just sent him a message. I was like, I respectfully disagree with your position on feminism. Instant block. The only other people I'm blocked by are just like people I don't mind being blocked by, like outright racists. Like, but anyway, so like, but like I've sort of gotten into this habit now of trying to get people to chill out and not just be at each other's throats. And so far it's been cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. So I guess word gets around. My only stipulation is you have to be cool to them because you're blocked for a reason, and it's my reputation. So if you can behave, good. And so like I try and promote that. I don't like it when I see this sort of combative things that people wouldn't do normally offline, I think that ruins a lot of great conversation and intellectual progress. So, my own little way, I kind of try to combat it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on that you said. The first one was now I can't remember. Oh, the first one was this anonymity online. I absolutely agree with you. I think that anonymity gives the opportunity for people to be really who they actually are, and that's the funny part. So you'll see like these comments by these people which are like really, really offensive and just stupid. And that's how these people actually are. They're actually being who they are because they're being anonymous. So they don't have to try to conform to what they believe is other people's expectations. So I kind of see a benefit of it is not so much people are being invisible as much as they're actually being who they really are. And most people will actually reveal who they actually are if you observe them long enough. You'll find out the quality of a person by watching them and interacting with them over a period of time.
Yeah, no. I had this exact conversation with someone the other day where that's what I was saying was like, yeah, that's exactly like the reason I say that about the internet. And the main thing is like, for better or for worse, you get to see people's like true character. Because they're not beholden to a lot of the social pressure that exists when they're anonymous. So it's like your morality, your ethics, your sort of the way you conduct yourself, you kind of get to see that removed largely from social pressure. And so it's a double-edged sword where it's like, yeah, there's a definite lot of like nasty stuff out there, but at the same time, it's like, wouldn't you rather know that about someone? Right. I don't know.
Exactly. I agree. And then the other thing I was just going to touch on. I'll just do the one, just the two, not the three. But the other one was Steve Shives. I actually, what happened was I knew about Steve Shives. Obviously, I heard about Steve Shives. And then somebody had mentioned that they were blocked by Steve Shives. They were kind of joking about it. Somebody else in the chat or something said I was blocked too. And so there was like a couple of people who said this. And then the conversation went on that he automatically blocks everyone, and he actually has to approve people to follow him. So out of curiosity, I went and I typed in Steve Shives' name. It took me a little bit to find him on Twitter, and I was blocked by him.
Oh, okay.
And I never even met the guy. I never even talked to him. I never even sent him a Twitter.
Yeah.
I never even engaged in him at all. I just went to his Twitter page just to see what everybody was talking about, and I was blocked.
Yeah. No, here's what. You're nowhere near the first person to experience this. Here's what he does. He doesn't block everyone by default. He's got a block bot.
Okay.
And it looks at who your followers or who you're following, and then like it's got some sort of combination. I think it's just like if you're affiliated with these people, it just automatically blocks you.
Okay.
But I wasn't blocked until I sent that. I just thought it would be funny to see his response to that exact quote, and sure enough, blocked by Steve Shives. Hashtag.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny that we have various people don't even like the term communities, but there are. There's essentially a group of people who find commonality in certain ideologies on YouTube. It's just the way it is. And people kind of group up and they kind of have their own little groups. And then sometimes you'll have infighting in these groups. Then you'll have some groups that fight with other groups for whatever reason. And I always find it kind of funny because I step back and I see, like, especially in the skepticism and atheist groups, the various fightings. And some of it is just kind of, it's not really serious. But then every so often you get people who are very serious about it. Like, it's like if somebody does something somebody else doesn't approve of, they're like excommunicated. And like all of his other friends have to excommunicate them too. I mean, this especially happened with Devin Tracy and Crowton T and Uzalu and some other people and Billy Bong, where they're like, I don't think so much maybe on Devin's side, but definitely on Crowton T's side and Uzalu's side, they're like, no. absolutely. It's like they will not engage with them at all. They're just like, they're like very hardcore, very stern about it. It's like, well, if that's what you want to do.
I refuse to do that. So like there's people that I'm cool with online that are not cool with each other. Right. Like I don't do that. Like I cannot stand that sort of thing. And so like the way I approach it is like neither party better talk shit about the other one to me because I'm not going to engage in that. So like as long as you and I are cool and it's just between us, then whatever beef you guys have is strictly between you. So I don't engage in that. And that's kind of the same reason I try and sort of in my own little way promote the more civil, respectful behavior, even if you disagree with people. So like I'm a liberal. I've been a liberal in some form all my life. There are plenty of people now on Twitter that are either conservative or alt-right that have respectful conversations with me because I'm not an asshole. Like I understand that we're going to disagree, but I keep it under control. And I really wish there was more of that. And so like that's why I do things like, you know, by example, behave that way or, you know, talk to people about other people being blocked. Like, look, this person is regretful of their behavior or, you know, they wish they weren't blocked by you, whatever the case may be. Would you please consider this? You know, that kind of thing. And so far, it's actually been pretty successful. I mean, I didn't start out to do it. It was just kind of like a favor, and it just got in the habit of word got around, I guess. But yeah, no. So like as far as the community thing goes, I have thought about this a lot, and it's like, no, like it or not, it is a community. Mm-hmm. It's a very loose community. Like there's none of, you know, it's not like super tightly knit, but it's a community. Like you're affiliated by the sense that you have enough things in common in the social circles you share. It's a community.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of a weird term, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's good to remain open to ideas and remain open to dialogue, and I think that that's good. I mean, for myself, I try to keep myself open to dialogue, but there's people I block. There's people I ban from my channel just because I find it's not going anywhere, you know.
Sure.
But most of these have been like on the Christian right, because a lot of my videos are, you know, debunking Christian beliefs, especially about other pagan religions, pagan belief systems. And some of those people, yeah, I blocked because I found that the dialogue, there was no productive outcome to it. You know, they were either just completely off and just completely believe all kinds of whatever nonsense that, like, you know, Alex Jones peddles on about, you know, whatever the Illuminati and one world governments, and those people are blocked. But for the most part, if people have a different belief than I do, I'm willing to accept, you know, listen to them. It doesn't mean that I have to accept what they believe. I can just sit there and say, well, I think you're stupid, or I disagree with you. You know, I mean, that's what it'll just come to. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I do find that people are it's easy, if you don't open yourself up to dialogue with other people, it's very easy to suffer from your own blindness.
Yeah, you don't want to wall yourself off.
Yeah, because it's very easy to buy into yourself, and then you actually become the person who is fascist, racist, or antisocial or whatever, because you're not allowing yourself to reflect and hear what other people are saying. So, for example, it's easy to say, well, that person's a Nazi, but, you know, it's okay to be a black nationalist. It's like, wait a minute, you're against white nationalism, but black nationalism is okay? It's like, that's, you know what I mean? But it's easy to remain blind to that if you don't open yourself up to talk and interact with other people, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And some of the things like that I've consider really valuable that I've gotten out of my formal education in philosophy is not only kind of developing these sort of nerves of steel when people say things to you, but being comfortable with altering your position or saying that you're wrong or something like that. And understandably, that's hard for a lot of people. It was hard for me for a long time too. But I mean, there's been times where I've even been talking to, like hardline conservatives where I was like, no, that makes sense. I mean, I agree with this part of it, but there are things we're going to agree on, and that's totally cool. Or they'll make a good point, and I'm like, okay, well, I got to modify my beliefs or whatever. I don't take an issue with that, and so like I understand that it's difficult for a lot of people to do that, but I really value that I got that out of my education, and so yeah, because when you do that, like when you don't do that, I should say, when you wall yourself off and don't talk to people that don't agree with you, that sort of thing, that's how you become dogmatic. Yeah. Like you will never expand yourself or, any type of, you won't really attain much if you behave that way, knowledge-wise. You'll never be exposed to all this different stuff that you would otherwise be if you were open to this sort of thing. So I don't know. I mean, because I don't know about you, but I've changed my mind on some major things in my life, and that's why. Mm-hmm. Like, had I just hung out with people that thought like me and ignored the other stuff, it never would have happened. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the benefits to having an open discourse with somebody, is that they're able to present their concepts and their beliefs, and you may find that, oh wow, you know what? I actually had a completely different viewpoint of this person. Now that you've explained this to me, now I have a better understanding of your position and what you're talking about. And so you can find out that your inherent belief about a particular person was wrong. Or you may find that, wow, they actually make some good points, and you may actually change your point of view on that. Or you might find out that, wow, they're even batshit crazier than I thought they were. Now I really don't want to have anything to fucking do with them. Or they are, so I mean, basically what I mean is it can reinforce the truth, and you can hold your position better, whatever way. But if you have that dialogue, it's much easier to do that.
Yeah. Well, and one other thing too is if you're willing to engage with people with opposing views to your own, you're very often forced to justify why you think what you do.
Right.
And that's great, because sometimes or actually a lot of times I would say, that helps you like recognize flaws in what you thought. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, we've been talking for 2 hours now, and I don't want to hold you up, but it's been great. We kind of went off the beaten path. We took a sharp left turn here, talking about the OTO, but I think it was okay. It was nice to talk about this stuff. So first of all, Ricky, I want to thank you so much for being on my channel and talking with us. And maybe we can do it again sometime. Maybe I know you've been on my Hangouts on Saturdays, so maybe we can.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been a cool discussion. I haven't really talked to anyone about this sort of thing in a long time. So yeah, it was really enjoyable. It was fun being able to sort of field comments or questions from the chat. So thanks everyone that showed up. And I'm totally open to doing it another time. Thank you.
And if you're interested, you don't have a YouTube channel, and I know you're still kind of back and forth on that. But if people are interested, they can follow you on Twitter. Is that correct?
Yeah, and as far as the YouTube thing goes, so right now what I'm doing is I have a show with Carrie, and then I also guest on other people's shows. So like I'm open to that. So like you and I are doing right now. And then as far as the YouTube channel goes, I'm thinking of just sort of gathering all that in one place and then maybe occasionally do some solo content. And then that would be the extent of it. Twitter is primarily where you can find me at. Okay. And you can use my handle. My DMs are open if you ever want to discuss anything. That's cool.
And what is the name of Carrie's show? Is it Duly Noted?
Yes.
It is Duly Noted. Okay, so if you go on to, if you're interested, when do you have shows? Do you have particular days? Do you have shows?
It's kind of up in the air right now, but usually we do it every Thursday. We have the sort of more in-depth, sort of somewhat serious topics that we cover.
Okay.
And then Sundays we just kind of have like fun stuff, like you spoke about Alex Jones. We did like conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So that's usually what we do.
Okay. All right. I don't have a link to the channel, but I put it in the chat. It's called Duly Noted. DULY space NOTED.
Yeah, right? Let me, I'll pull it up real quick. That's
okay,
cool.
Okay. And, I don't know, you could probably tweet it to me and then I'll copy it and put it in the chat.
Oh, sure.
So if people want to check that out.
Yeah, we do that on a regular basis. And we also, we usually blast it out on Twitter when we're about to go on. So that's another way you might catch it. So there's that. Got it in the DM for you.
Okay. Let me see. There it is. Okay, great. So let me see.
I suppose I could have just put it in the chat myself.
No, I don't think you can.
Oh, it doesn't let you do URLs, does it?
Yeah, you would have to adjust it before you put it in there, but for some reason it'll let me do it. So I'm going to put a link to their channel, duly noted in the chat if people want to go and check it out. It's kind of interesting. You kind of go over all kinds of various topics, right? You don't really.
Yeah, it's real casual. We start off with like a few like topics that we definitely want to discuss, but it's really informal. It's just a casual discussion, and we just kind of let it naturally sort of branch out from there. So it's interesting. Yeah, we do a lot of cool things.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Chat, you guys were fantastic. I know you guys had some back and forth in the chat towards the end there a little bit, but looks like everybody kept it rather civil. There was no bloodshed. So that's good. And thank you all for your questions. I really appreciate it. Again, Ricky, thank you so much for being on. And thank you all, and I hope you all have a good night. So, blessed be.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good night.